"We'll go no further today," I said. "I wouldn't wake him for all the gold that runs between the fingers of the 5 peaks, nor for all the devils that may be behind them." The crawling men lay in a sleep as deep as the Styx. We bathed and bandaged the pads that had been his hands. Arms and legs were as rigid as though they were crutches. He did not move while we worked over him. He lay as he had fallen, the arms a trifle raised, the knees bent. I began filing the band that ringed the sleeper's waist. It was gold, but it was like no gold I had ever handled. Pure gold is soft. This was soft, too, but it had an unclean, viscid life of its own. It clung to the file, and I could have sworn that it writhed like a live thing when I cut into it. I gashed through it, bent it away from the body, and hurled it away. It was loathsome. All that day the crawler slept. Darkness came, and still he slept. But that night there was no shaft of blue haze from behind the peaks, no questing globes of light, no whispering. Some spell of horror seemed withdrawn, but not far. Both Anderson and I felt that the menace was there, withdrawn perhaps, but waiting. It was noon next day when the crawling man awoke. I jumped as the pleasant drawling voice sounded. "How long have I slept?" he said. His pale blue eyes grew quizzical as I stared at him. A night, and almost 2 days," I said. "Were there any lights up there last night?" He nodded to the north eagerly. "Any whispering?" "Neither," I answered. His head fell back, and he stared up at the sky. "They've given it up, then," he said at last. "Who have given it up?" asked Anderson. And once more, "The people of the pit," the crawling man answered. We stared at him, and again, faintly, I, for one, felt that queer, maddening desire that the lights had brought with them. "The people of the pit," he repeated. "Things some god of evil made before the flood, and that somehow have escaped the good god's vengeance. They were calling me," he added simply. Anderson and I looked at each other, the same thought in both our minds. "No," said the crawling man, reading what it was, "I'm not insane. Give me a very little to drink. I'm going to die soon. Will you take me as far south as you can before I die? And afterwards you can build a big fire and burn me. I want to be in such shape that no hellish wild of theirs can drag my body back to them." "You'll do it when I've told you about them," he said as we hesitated. He drank the brandy and water we lifted to his lips. "Arms and legs quite dead," he said. "Dead as I'll be soon. Well, they did well for me. Now, I'll tell you what's up there behind that hand. Hell. Listen, my name is Stanton, Sinclair Stanton, class 1900, Yale, explorer. I started away from Dawson last year to hunt for 5 peaks that rose like a hand in a haunted country and ran pure gold between them. Same thing you were after? I thought so. Late last fall my comrade sickened. I sent him back with some Indians. A little later my Indians found out what I was after. They ran away from me. I decided I'd stick, build a cabin, stocked myself with food, and lay down to winter it. Did it not badly. It was a pretty mild winter, you'll remember. In the spring I started off again. A little less than 2 weeks ago, I sighted the 5 peaks. Not from this side, though, the other. Give me some more brandy. I'd made too wide a detour, he went on. I'd gotten too far north. I beat back. From this side, you see nothing but forest straight up to the base of the hand. Over on the other side. He was silent for a moment. Over there is forest too, but it doesn't reach so far. No, I came out of it. Stretching for miles in front of me was a level plain. It was as worn and ancient-looking as the desert around the broken shell of Babylon. At its end rose the peaks. Between me and them, far off, was what looked like a low dike of rocks. Then I ran across the road. "The road?" cried Anderson incredulously. "The road," said the crawling man. "A fine, smooth stone road. It ran straight on to the mountain. Oh, it was a road all right. And worn as though millions and millions of feet had passed over it for thousands of years. On each side of it were sand and heaps of stones. After a while, I began to notice these stones. They were cut, and the shape of the heap somehow gave me the idea that 100,000 years ago they might have been the ruins of houses. They were as old-looking as that. I sensed man about them, and at the same time they smelled of immemorial antiquity. The peaks grew closer, the heaps of ruins thicker. Something inexpressibly desolate hovered over them, something sinister. Something reached from them that struck my heart, like the touch of ghosts so old that they could be only the ghosts of ghosts. I went on. And now I saw that what I had thought to be the low rock range at the base of the peaks was a thicker litter of ruins. The Hand Mountain was really much farther off. The road itself passed through these ruins and between two high rocks that raised themselves like a gateway. The crawling man paused. His hands began that sickening pad-pad again. Little drops of bloody sweat showed on his forehead. But after a moment or two he grew quiet. He smiled. "They were a gateway," he said. "I reached them. I went between them. I sprawled flat, clutching the earth in awe and terror. For I was on a broad stone platform. Before me was sheer space. Imagine the Grand Canyon 3 times as wide, roughly circular, and with the bottom dropped out. That would be something like what I was looking into. It was like peeping over the edge of a cleft world down into the infinity where the planets roll. On the far side stood 5 peaks. They looked like a gigantic warning hand stretching up to the sky. The lips of the abyss curved away on each side of me. I could see down perhaps 1,000 feet. Then a thick blue haze shut out the eye. It was like the blue you see gather on the high hills at dusk. But the pit, it was awesome. Awesome as the Maori's Gulf of Ranelagh that sinks between the living and the dead, and that only the freshly released soul has strength to leap, but never strength again to leap back. I crept back from the verge and stood up, weak, shaking. My hand rested against one of the rocks of the gateway. There was carving upon it. There, in sharp outlines, was the heroic figure of a man. His back was turned. His arms were stretched above his head, and between them he carried something that looked like a sun disk with radiating